discuss today about process modeling, right? So this is one integral part of the process control. Since unless you have a process model to work with, you cannot design any control system. So this is a fundamental part in designing any control system, be it process control or any other control. So in this lecture, what we address three issues. That is, what is a process model, why we need to develop a process model, and last but not the least, the difference between lumped parameter model and the distributed parameter model, or lumped parameter system and distributed parameter system. I think if you can remember in signals and systems class when developing dynamic model, I've mentioned about this lumped parameter and distributed parameter. So I'll briefly go through some example of process that can be classified as lumped parameter or distributed parameter. So let's start with the definition of model. The primary objective of finding this model is to assist one in developing an understanding of the dynamic behavior of the process. Okay, so the primary requirement for assessing the dynamic behavior of a process is a mathematical model of the process. Okay, so mathematical model is what we sought here. They went to a mathematical model. Now, the term model comes from the Latin word modus, that means a measure. So, if you go by some definitions, the common definitions, uses a noun. The model means a small representation of a planned or existing object. The term key here is a small representation of a planned. Planned means you have planned it, but you are yet to build up or set up the process, but that still is a model. Or if you can also model, you can also model an existing or operating plant. That is also a model. So it is a small representation of a planned or existing object. The object is here used to globalize the definition. Another way of defining the model is a mathematical or physical system obeying certain specified conditions whose behavior is used to understand a physical, biological, or social system to which it is analogous in some way. It is the model is defined as a mathematical or a physical system. Mathematical model we all know, we already derived in the signal systems class. And physical system means you can get a scale down model, a physical model with a scale down or scale up. That's a physical model, but that should not be the actual model. Something, a mathematical model or a physical model that behaves in an analogous manner to the actual system for which you are deriving the model. And it should obviously obey some specific condition, the specified conditions. Okay. Then you do not have to study the physical system rigorously. What you can do, the behavior of this model can be used to understand that physical system. I'm giving emphasis on the physical system because from control engineering perspective, we'll be developing model. From process control industry perspective, we'll be developing models of the physical systems. Now, the definition of model is equally applicable to biological or social systems, depending upon your perspective. So, it is basically a mathematical model or a physical model that you can study to understand the actual behavior of the system under consideration. So, once you have defined the process model, if you want to summarize the fact that in a single word, a model is a representation of a system or object, right? This is important thing. It's a representation. Now, you have to keep in mind that whenever we'll be using the term model, we will be referring to the term as a mathematical model. I'm sorry, the last portion is not visible because of this tablet. So let's ignore that part. It's a mathematical model that we will be referring to. Now, let us come to the process model. What do you mean by process model? A process model is nothing but a set of equations. For dynamic model or dynamic system, we get a set of integral differential equation. Now, this set of equation will allow us to predict the behavior, chemical process you can ignore, of a process system. But keep in mind, only this set of equations may not be sufficient. if you are dealing with, suppose, some integral differential equations, because we know to solve integral equation or integral differential equations, we need more information, like initial conditions, right? These are the boundary conditions that you need, or we need some more data to solve the equation. So whenever you're dealing with a process model, the simple mathematical equation may not be sufficient. You have to provide enough data.
Isn't it,
Yes,
sir?
yes, yes.
Sir, Pooja is trying to join the class, but she's
Okay,
not able to.
okay. Which section?
Section B.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Right. Now, our emphasis in respect of process modeling will be on the fundamental model. That is the model which is based on the first principles. Okay, the model that will be developed based on the first principles. That is the basic laws of physics or system theory. Now, by the term fundamental, we mean that are based on the known physical or chemical relationships, because the process industry is mainly involved in very chemical processes. So, physical relationships. What are these relationships? These relationships will include the conservation of, sorry, yes, I have to use this, mass and conservation of energy, the reaction kinetics, the transport phenomena, the thermodynamic relationship, if there is any, the equilibrium conditions, this. So mainly, if you go by the common sense, the fundamental equations means conservation of mass and conservation of energy. By this, we can obtain the fundamental models. Another common model is the empirical model. This is something new term for some of you maybe. Now, what does this empirical model stand for? Now, this empirical model is nothing but it's basically an experimental model. Okay, why we are going for the empirical model? In some situations, we find that defining or obtaining a mathematical model is becoming too complex. It may become complex in two aspects. That is, either the formulation of model itself is very complicated, or in another aspect, you may find that once you have developed the model equations, it is very difficult to analyze the system behavior based on the model equation, because you have to go for some numerical solution of the equations with the required data to obtain the response. Because at the end of the day, the purpose of the model is to predict the response of a system given some input or other conditions. So if you have more difficulty in either obtaining the model or predicting the output, then the basic function or basic requirement of the model is not satisfied. So in those cases, what we do, we do not go for obtaining a physical model, rather we go for empirical model. And this empirical model has a satisfactory predictive capability. If this model has a satisfactory predictive capability, if you can ensure that, this portion is very important. This is very important. Then only we prefer or we go for empirical model. Otherwise, it is preferable to go for theoretical model. I'll come to it. Then it will be more easy to understand. Okay. So, what is an example of an empirical model? A simple least square feet of an equation to experimental data. We have run some experiments. We have got the data, input output data, and now you just put a least square feet of an equation to the experimental data. That is a way of obtaining an empirical model. Generally, we will prefer the models used on fundamental knowledge. Okay, not based on empirical model knowledge, because the fundamental models are more accurate over a larger range of condition than the empirical model. Why I'm saying so? Because the empirical models are,
Sir, somebody is trying to join.
which section?
B section.
Okay, yes, I've admitted. Why I'm saying that the fundamental model is generally more accurate over a large range of conditions than empirical model is a fact. that the empirical models are good for interpolation, but they are rarely used or not very useful for extrapolation. Why I am saying so? Because it is only reliable within the range for which you have used the data to fit an equation or curve to the data. If the prediction falls within that range, then you can rely on the predicted value via the law of interpolation. But if the predicted value is beyond the range of experimentation, then that will be something, an uncharted territory. So in those cases, you cannot rely on that prediction because it's simply an extrapolation. You never know whether that extrapolation will hold or not because you have not chartered that territory. You have not put experiments to substantiate that territory. So that is why there's a restriction of empirical model. But still, we go for empirical model. Why? If you remember, I have told you that there is a certain difficulty in obtaining the fundamental model. So if you look at the hierarchy, in a way we develop the fundamental model, we first start with a very simple model, considering the lumped parameter model with ideal elements. But that response, the prediction of the response will be far, far different than actual response. Because we have neglected most of the dynamics, most of the coupling, most of the nonlinearities, most of the natural phenomena, because we have considered ideal elements. So next stage will be to consider practical elements. So equations will get complicated. Then you consider the couplings, the mutual interactions. Equations will get more complicated. Then you charter the territory of nonlinearity, where the elements will not be linear anymore. Then equations will become more and more complex. And as you move on like this, what will happen? The predicted result will tend to match the actual result of the system more accurately. But how far would you go in this direction? Now, you can go only up till then when you reach a point which is called the point of diminishing return. That is, in each step, your mathematical complexity is getting increased, right? But what you're gaining is an improvement in a prediction so that you can have more accurate study of analysis of the system. And one point will come after several steps that even if you go for more complex model involving a lot more mathematical complexity, the improvement in the prediction will be very, very less. So it's a point of diminishing return. The entire effort that you put in developing the model will yield only a very, very little improvement in the prediction. So what you'll do, you'll stop there. Or you'll get one or two steps back to simplify the model. But in some situations, this prediction may not be adequate, may not be sufficient. So in those cases, it is recommended that you go for empirical model where you will have the data at least over a range of values on which you put a curve or equation so that even if you do not have an actual model, you can fit a second order curve, a third order curve, like that, a second order, third order equation to the data, experimental data. Then you have a simplified, comparatively simplified model, which will be valid only in the range of data that you have experimented. So this is the difficulty of fundamental model, and there is obviously a limitation of empirical model. So both of them have some pros and cons. So we have to find a trade-in between them. Okay, next, let's move on. Now, how the models are used. So we have developed a model, be it fundamental, be it empirical. Now, what is the purpose of this model? Now, normally, first and foremost purpose is to given a set of input data, we have to predict the output response. That is fine. What else? A model can be used to solve the following types of problems. See, I think these are very, very interesting topics, problems. First, marketing. Say from a production house point of view, if you have a model, then you can easily see or foresee that what will be the effect of change in price of a product in a demand. If you increase the price of the product to improve the profit, whether the demand will decrease, that study requires a model. Okay, economical model. Allocation. This is again coming to the physical. If you have several sources of raw materials and several manufacturing plant, then what do you have to do? we have to distribute the raw materials among the plants, and we have to fix what product should be developed at which plant. So that cannot be done in a unique way. There will be many options. So by a model of the entire process, what you can do, you can optimize this raw material and the manufacturing process so that the profit is maximized. The only objective is to maximize the profit. Next, synthesis. You have decided which raw materials will be going to which product, which plant, and which product will be developed at that plant or manufactured at that plant. Then the question comes, what will be the process by which you will manufacture that product? So if you have to study that, you cannot just set up different processes and then study. What you have to do, you have a model, mathematical model, which will give you an idea. And from that, you can choose the process of manufacturing. Design. Once you finalize the process, then you have to design regarding the size, capacity, and type of equipment that will be necessary for that particular process. So see, it's a hierarchical process, and each and every step requires a mathematical model. It's not an operation. You have designed it. Now you have to find out the optimum operating condition to maximize the yield of a product. So this again requires a mathematical model for study. Control. Even if it is operating, you have to ensure that it remains in that operating condition, subjected to disturbances. So that requires a design of a control, and that is again that will require the mathematical model. Then comes the safety. In case of an equipment failure, you have to predict or you have to have an idea that what will be the impact on the operating personnel or other process equipments. These are called the contingency studies. This can be done based on this mathematical model. Then environmental safety, because we have to again clearly specify that how long it will take for the biodegradable degradable soil to what to say degrade the hazardous waste. This study again can be used as a, but you can use a mathematical model to convey this information. So these are the places or these are the problems which we face, and for each of these problems we use a mathematical model to arrive at a solution or arrive at a point where we can operate. Now, these models that we're talking about so far are mainly based on steady state analysis. That is, you have an operating point in mind, be there any disturbances, the operating point should come back to the actual operating point. That is our only objective. That is, steady state should not be disturbed. But in some cases, only the steady state design is not desirable. Okay, because the steady state design, that is a design with the desired steady state characteristics based on minimal energy consumption and all, may become dynamically inoperable. What does that mean? Suppose you have designed a steady state operation and it is being controlled and it is operating smoothly, yielding minimum energy consumption and maximum profit. Now, due to some disturbance, it has moved to another state. Then your control action will take place and it will get it back to the actual state. But this dynamics that it is disturbed and coming back to the actual state may be such that in between some of the product line equipments may get damaged. That is, the dynamic behavior is very poor. So that you cannot allow. So what we need? We not only need a steady state model to analyze, we also need to analyze the dynamic behavior following any contingency situation or disturbance. That's why the dynamic model will be important, equally important. We'll discuss about that today. Now coming back to the steady state model, what we have discussed in a systems class, there's a lumped parameter system, and what it didn't discuss then was a distributed parameter system. In actual scenario, we normally face both, and we'll see what is the difference between them. To start with the lumped parameter system. In a lumped parameter system, it is assumed that the variable of interest, say temperature, is variable of only one independent variable. That is, it changes only with one independent variable, say time. But with space, it doesn't change. A common example was Suppose they have a room and you want to represent the temperature of the room. What do? You select a point, maybe at the center of the room, and measure the temperature there. And whatever variation in the room temperature we predict or we note, we take a note of that particular location's temperature only. But in different places in the room, the temperature may be different because temperature also has a spatial distribution. But in round parameter model, we ignore the spatial distribution. We're only concentrating on temperature at a particular point and its temporal behavior. So this is a round parameter system. Obviously, you can understand it requires a lot of assumptions. So what will be another example? Physical example will be a perfectly mixed tank. Perfectly mixed means it is so well stirred that the temperature throughout the tank is uniform. On the other hand, a distributed parameter model where the variable of interest is a function of more than one independent variable. Say for the room temperature, if you consider the spatial distribution, then at different location in the room, the temperature will be different at different times. So temperature in the room will be a variable with respect to time and position. So this is the concept of distributed parameter. So if I ask you, you'll obviously say so round parameter modeling will be much simpler. Obviously. But will that be actual representation of the system? I guess not. We have to satisfy a lot of simplifying assumptions. So distributed parameter model will be the way to go. But I don't know whether I'll be able to cover this, but in for the academic purpose, we'll consider mostly lamp parameter models and we have been considering that. So next, let us see a lamp parameter system. What we have here is a perfectly insulated and well stirred. This is a very important term. Tank, where there is a hot stream of 60 degree mixed with a cold liquid stream of 10 degree. And this well mixing means the temperature throughout this tank is equal, say, what's it, capital T, and this temperature is uniform throughout the tank, and this again is the temperature of the exit stream. This is the concept of perfect mixing or well stirred. So this system can be modeled as a lamp parameter system. What will be the behavior? The steady state behavior is something like this. This is a hot flow fraction. There's a fraction of the hot water. Zero means there's only cold water. So the temperature, steady state temperature will be 10 degrees centigrade. And one means the entire water is a hot water. There is no cold water. So the temperature will be 60 degree. So the steady state behavior obviously will be a linear function of the hot flow fraction. Because of the ideal condition, the stirring is absolutely perfect and there's a perfect insulation. So it will be a linear function like this. Right? It's very easy. So this will be the steady state behavior of the lamp parameter model under consideration. So very simple things. So it's a linear steady state relationship. Now let us see about the dynamic behavior. By dynamic behavior, what I mean, suppose at any point of time, I've increased the fraction of hot flow by 20%. Then this is time and this is the temperature of the tank. And this is the time. If I increase the hot flow fraction by 20%, we see the temperature of the tank increases from 35 to 45 degrees centigrade in this manner. Can anyone tell me whether this behavior, and again, if you increase, sorry, if you decrease the hot flow fraction by 20%, it reduces from 35 to 25. If you increase by 10%, it increases from 35 to 40. Can anyone tell me whether this behavior is linear or non-linear? Anybody? Anybody there? Are you there?
Yes, sir.
Any idea whether this behavior is linear or non-linear? Arijit Paul,
Sir, yes.
what, linear or non-linear?
So I think it is non-linear.
Okay, okay. Then Pawan Kumar, linear, non-linear. Pawan Kumar, Pawan is not there. Shreya, linear or non-linear? Looking at the picture, any idea?
This is non-linear.
By looking at the figure, it looks like non-linear, right? So,
Yes, sir.
does anybody feel that it will be linear, or all of you agree that it will be non-linear? If anybody feels that it is linear, then you may raise your voice. So complete silence means either nobody else is there or everybody agrees that it will be non-linear. Strictly speaking, it will be linear. Why? What we have been distracted by this nature of the curve, right? But this portion is nothing but the transient portion. Look at the steady state portion. At 0% hot flow fraction, it is 35. When you have changed it by 10%, it moves to 40. For 10%, the increment is 5. For 20%, sorry, for 20% increase, what is the increment? 10. For minus 20%, the decrement is again 10. So if you plot this percentage versus temperature rise or temperature fall, it's strictly following a linear system, a linear relationship. So we have been distracted by the nonlinear nature of the transient response, but we're dealing with steady state behavior, right? So the behavior of the system will be linear. It will linear react to the change in the hot flow fraction in a linear manner. If you increase by 20%, the temperature will rise by 10 degree. If you increase by 10%, temperature rises by 5 degree. If you reduce the fraction by 20%, the temperature will reduce by 10 degree. So there's a linear relationship between them. So you have to be more specific, more, you have to concentrate more or give some thought before jumping into a conclusion, right? That's why I've mentioned this is a time axis. Anyway, okay, let's move on. To a distributed parameter system. An example of a distributed parameter system can be given by this counter flow heat exchanger. Now, in this heat exchanger, cold water is coming through this path and hot steam is going through this side. Okay. Now this steam is superheated. So what will happen as this water flowing in this channel will come in contact with this hot steam in this channel, this water will pick up some heat, will pick up some energy, and the temperature of the water will increase. But this variation in the temperature of the water will not be a linear function. It will vary with time, obviously, and position. At this point, it will encounter only this much of steam. But at this point, it will encounter this much of steam. So we expect the temperature at this point to be much higher than this point. So there will be distribution of temperature of water with respect to space and obviously with respect to time. Let us see how the distribution would look like. This will be the distribution. If I if this is the temperature of the inlet water and this is the length 0 to 1. 1 means at the exit. I think it's not visible over here. So the temperature profile will move like this, right? See, initially the rate of change of temperature was very high, but as the we progress, this rate, sorry, just seems to reduce, and ultimately it reaches the steady state at the outlet is around 88 or something like this. Can you say why this initially it was so high, but as we move on in distance from the inlet to outlet, this is inlet, this is outlet. Why this slope with respect to the temperature of the water is decreasing? Because the water temperature is increasing. So the temperature gradient between the water and the steam is gradually decreasing as we move on from inlet to outlet. So the heat transfer rate is getting reduced. That is why the slope is getting less and less as we move towards the outlet. So this is actually a nonlinear behavior, purely nonlinear behavior, right? With respect to space and the temperature of the water. And if you look at the steady state temperature profile, okay, which has two functions, there is inlet temperature, inlet water temperature, and outlet water temperature. This behavior will be linear. Why? If you have an inlet temperature of 86, then 0 degree, then outlet will be 86. But if the inlet temperature is 80 or 60, then outlet temperature will be obviously more than that because the water is already preheated. If you have the inlet temperature 100 degree, then no heat transfer will take place between the steam and the water, so it will remain at 100 degree. So this steady state behavior, mind it, will be a linear one. But the dynamic behavior over the space will be typically a nonlinear function. Okay, this steady state behavior is very important. You have to always concentrate on the steady state temperature. See. So this concludes the first part. Next, we'll discuss about the dynamic process model, because I've already mentioned the steady state model may not be sufficient to ensure the proper operation of the process. So the dynamic process models means you're considering the dynamics of the system, that is integral differential equations will come into the picture. I'll breeze through some of the initial portions. Now, why these models will be necessary? To improve the understanding of the process, because you can use this dynamic model for computer simulation and you can study the transient behavior so that the behavior of the system with respect to any disturbance can be studied, because in computer simulation you have the complete liberty because you're not physically damaging. There's no chance of physically damaging the system. So the dynamic process model will be very, very important in studying the dynamic behavior under different contingency conditions. Sorry, this computer simulation will be equally important not only for dynamic behavior but also for the steady state process behavior. Okay, because the dynamic models will finally yield you the steady state behavior. Next, training of plant operating personnel. When you are recruited in a process industry, you will not be provided a first-hand experience, or you will not be allowed to operate the plant by yourself. You have to go through the simulation, like Air Force. The Air Force trainee pilots never used to have their hands on the fighter planes. What they go through? They go through the flight simulator. They go through the sessions of flight simulator. Similarly, if you have a dynamic process model, you can have process simulators for the training purpose and how to deal with the emergency situations. Only when you graduate from this training process, you will be allowed to operate the plants. So this is a very important advantage of having this dynamic process model. And then the control strategy, because whenever you are designing a control strategy, you cannot simply apply them directly on the process, because there will be some uncharted territory that may affect the system adversely. So what you have to do? You have to first simulate the process and apply these control strategies on the simulated environment and see the responses. And then what you have the freedom, you have to retune. You can recalibrate your control time and again. Okay. And this can also be useful in judging or identifying the process variables. You may be wrong in choosing the process variables or the manipulated variable, which are to be measured or estimated and which are to be manipulated. There may be different choices. But in physical situations, you cannot have that liberty of these choices. But in a process simulation, you can have this liberty, right? So for model-based control strategy, this process model is a plays a very important role. Okay. And then finally, once you have decided the control strategy, you can optimize them by recalculating the operating condition, right? And again, this will be helpful if your operating condition changes. That is, your demand has increased. So you have to move on to the new operating condition. Then you can find out this new operating condition by running the simulations on the simulated dynamic model. So that's why you see this dynamic model plays a very important role in the operation as well. In initial stage is okay, but in operation, it plays a very important role. Now, these dynamic models can be classified into three categories. Number one, theoretical model that is developed based on principles, chemistry, physics, biology is a fundamental model basically. Empirical model by fitting the experimental data. These are the two things that I have already introduced. Third one is a semi-empirical model. Because in theoretical model, there are some limitations. We'll come to that. Empirical model, there are some limitations. But in semi-empirical model, it seems to use the advantage of both the fields. So what we have a theoretical background and you also have experimental data to substantiate that. Right? So in this case, the theoretical model that we arrive at is calculated from the experimental data. So it has the advantage of both the fields. Let us see. Theoretical model has two very important advantages. The fundamental model, what do you say? They provide physical insight because it's based on the physical laws and they're applicable over a wide range of conditions. That's very important. But there are certain disadvantages. What are these? They tend to be expensive and time consuming. Expensive means not only in terms of price or cost, also in terms of human effort, right? Or computational effort. So you tend to put a stop to the theoretical model if it becomes too expensive or time consuming. Again, the theoretical models of complex processes, they include certain model parameters that are not readily available. So these are very difficult. So what we propose is to go for empirical model then, because this is based on experimental data and much easier to develop. You just find some experimental data and put a curve on the experimental data, second order curve, third order curve, whichever you feel necessary. But it has a serious disadvantage. What is that? It does not extrapolate. It is only valid within the range of data for which you have developed the model. I have already mentioned that. Next, the empirical model. So it should be used with caution. Okay, for the operating conditions that are not included in the experimental data used to fit. That is, even if you use the extrapolation, it should be used with caution. It should not be reliable on that. And the range of data over which this experimental data is collected is normally very narrow because you cannot have that liberty of experimenting too much with a physical system. So as compared to the full operating range of process operating conditions, you may only have a data over a small portion of that. So this is again a limitation of this empirical model. So what is the solution then? A semi-empirical model, because they incorporate the theoretical knowledge. It can be extrapolated over a wider range because we have the theoretical background as compared to empirical models. And since you're using the experimental data to obtain the theoretical model, it will be less laborious or the requires less effort. Consequently, the semi-empirical models are gaining more and more popularity and they are used. And they have been reported in 1998 in different case studies. So I'll not. So I'll just now brief the steps that you should follow. Then I'll give an example, and that will be the end of the class. So what I have to for deriving a model or developing a dynamic model, first thing you have to state the modeling objective and the end use of the model, and this will determine the required level of model detail and the model accuracy. This is a very, very important point. What is the objective of developing the model and what will be the end use? If you're using for some delicate work, it is preferable that you go for delicate modeling, that is intricate modeling. And if you're only obtaining the model for some crude work, say from just for initial tuning of a controller or from initial estimate, then you can go for a somewhat approximate model. So the level of your effort or detailing or accuracy will depend upon your end use and objective. So this statement should be very, very clear at the start of the modeling. Then to draw a schematic diagram and label all the process variables. Then important, you have to list all the assumptions involved. Because whenever you are providing the model to someone, you should also be very specific that this model is developed based on these assumptions. Otherwise, this model is not valid. So this is very important. So in this case, you should be parsimonious. That is, the model should not be more complicated than necessary to meet the modeling objective. It reiterates the first point. It should not be more complicated than necessary. যতটুকু দরকার ততটুকুই আমরা যাব, বেশি করার দরকারই নেই। Fourth, দেখো, you have to find out whether it's a distributed parameter model or a lump parameter model. If it's a distributed parameter model, then instead of a differential equation, you have to go for partial differential equation. If possible, I will give you an example of that also. Then you have to write down the appropriate conservation equations, that is mass conservation of mass, conservation of component, conservation of energy, and so on. Then you have to find out the equilibrium condition where the operating point will reach, right? Then perform the degree of freedom analysis. I shall not devote any time because in a due course we'll discuss about the degree of freedom analysis. Then simplify the model. Do not keep unnecessary equations and unnecessary portions that will not be useful for the objective you aimed for. So you simplify the model, and if possible, arrange the model in such a way that left-hand side will yield the output with the right-hand side containing all the process variables in an algebraic manner or differential equation manner, whatever. It should be very clearly distinguished. This is the output, this is the input. Because that will be very easy to put in the computer simulation. Okay. Then you have to classify the inputs, which are manipulated variable, which are inputs, and among them, which are the disturbance variables. That should be clearly classified. So these are steps that you should follow. Rahul, you put your mic off. Rahul. So let us see a dynamic model example. We have already discussed the steady state model of a stirred tank blending process, okay, based on mass and component balances. Right? Now we'll develop a dynamic model that will allow us to analyze more general situations. That is the dynamic behavior with time. So let us consider this example. See, there's a slight change here. What are the changes? Let me first put the slide on, then I'll discuss. Okay. There are certain changes. If you can remember, in previous case, this x2 was 1, but we have put x2 and w2 both to be variable. x1, w1, these are also variable. First change. Next change, our outlet in previous case was from there. It's the overflow line. Now we have a outlet from the bottom of the tank. What does that mean? This means when you are using this overflow line, this W will always be given like this because this overflow line, and the volume of the tank will be constant. But under these situations, when you have a flow from this side, W may not be equal to W1 plus W2, and under this situation, this V of the volume will be a variable one. So this is how we introduce dynamics into the plant. right? Let us see how we can model this. See, you have changed. You have noticed the change. This is changed, and this is variable, and the outlet is taken from the bottom of the tank, not from the overflow line. Let us see. So first of all, you have to write down the mass balance. What is that? Rate of accumulation of mass in the tank, rate of mass in minus rate of mass out. So if you consider the volume to be V and the density to be rho, then we can write the mass, the rate of mass accumulation as d of V rho dt, because V rho will be the mass and this will be the rate of mass accumulation. And therefore, this will be given as W1 plus W2, 2 inlet flows, minus W. Agree? So this is the equation of the mass balance for the blending system. If you look at, if you remember the last case, in the last case, when steady state analysis, the equation was something different. We'll come to it. Next, we consider the material balance for component A. So we assume that the blending tank is perfectly mixed. That means it has two implications. There are no concentration gradient in the tank contents. Throughout the tank, the concentration is constant, same. And next, the composition of exit stream is equal to the tank composition. That is the same composition is getting out of the tank. This is an ideal situation. So this is a perfectly mixed assumption. So this is only valid for low viscosity fluids, but for a high viscosity fluid like molten metals and polymers, this may not be applicable. But since it is an academic purpose, we assume that our plant is a perfectly mixed tank. So what we'll have for perfect mixing assumption, the rate of accumulation of component A will be d of Vx dt. X is a mass fraction of A. So the dynamic component balance will be, this is the mass because Vx into rho is the density. So V rho x dt, d of that is W1x1, that is concentration or composition of A in inlet stream 1 multiplied by inlet stream flow rate, plus composition of A in inlet stream 2 multiplied by inlet 2 flow rate, minus the composition of A in the tank and multiplied by the outlet flow rate. So if you just remember the corresponding steady state model, this was a mass balance. This bar means this is a steady state value, that time invariant. So this is a steady state, and at steady state, W will be equal to W1 plus W2 as expected. And the component balance was like this. So Wx was equal to W1x1 plus W2x1. So if you relate these two, these equations will be arrived if you put this differential term equal to 0, we'll leave this. Previously, if you put this term to be 0, then W1 plus W2 is equal to 0, equal to W. So we arrive at the steady state equation. So these dynamic equations are absolutely right, and they depict the steady state behavior as well when you consider this rate to be 0. That is, the steady state is achieved, because we know at steady state or at equilibrium condition, the rate of change becomes 0. That's why at steady state, the dynamic equations will become the steady state equations, and that perfectly agrees with the equation that we arrived or corresponding to the situation that we have. But keep in mind that at steady state, this is true. But during dynamics, this W1 plus W2 may not be equal to W. And again, this component balance at steady state is true. But during dynamic condition, this will not be equal to 0. It will have some rate of change. This is how the dynamic behavior is modeled. We'll come to that in more detail in the next class. So our purpose is to characterize the transient behavior for widely varying condition, because we can now analyze different contingencies. What are the contingencies? Suppose the exit composition has changed after a sudden increase in inlet flow rate or a gradual decrease in the inlet composition. Anything can happen. If you come back to the original figure, there are a lot of permutation and combination that may happen. X1 may change, keeping all other elements fixed. W1 may change, keeping all other three fixed. X1, W1 both may change, keeping X2, W2 fixed. X1 and X2 may change, keeping W1, W2 fixed. X2 and W2 may change, keeping these two fixed. So there are a lot of permutation and combination. So what we need to have, we need to study the effect of all the changes on the transient behavior. So in the next class, we'll derive the necessary dynamic equations to study the different situations that the tank system or this process may undergo and study their dynamic behavior or the transient behavior. Okay, for that, we need to develop a more conducive dynamic equation, okay, from this differential equations, right? So this will be enough for today, right? I don't think you have, do you have any question?
No, sir.
As expected. Okay, so I'll stop the recording here.